Okay, so this one is, like I said, again on a small scale. This is my hand, so you can see how small it is. It's the size of my hand. But I just want to do a cockerel's head, and I'm just going to put a small mark where I want the eye to be, and then a mark where I want the beak to be. And the beak on a cockerel is, again, like I said, quite curved like that. Okay, so there's a slight suggestion. I've only done it lightly so that I don't see the line through. I've just dipped my brush in my tea. So clean water, and I'm going to put 2 or 3 colours down. What should we start with? I know, alizarin crimson, and I'm going to use purple. And if you haven't got purple, mix alizarin crimson with ultramarine. And then I've got like a phthalo or an indigo blue for this head. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of water. My water is now blue because I've just mixed it with the colour that I was just mixing. I'm just going to put a little bit, which is useful for this because you can actually, at least you can see what's going on. And I'm putting the water down in a sort of feathery fashion, if you can see that. And we're going to blow or allow the paint to merge into that. So decide which colour you want to be dominant, and I'm going to use the red. So I'm going to put the red around where his wattle would be. You can even paint a little bit of it if you want to, and up into, I don't know whether this is the wattle or that's the wattle. Who knows? So can you see how the colour is moving of its own accord? So just dot it in thick around the main section of, around his eye basically, and then just let it move up into, so very loose, don't fuss, right? Really important that you don't fuss with it, keep it loose. And then we're going to go for a bit of purple, and I'm going to put the purple down here, and this bit here doesn't have any water on it, so you can see it behaves differently without the water on. So you get some dry sort of sections that don't move, and then you've got the more defined sections where it's dry, and the more blurred sections where there's water underneath. And then we've got this blue colour. I'm going to put a little bit there and a little bit coming down here, and a few more bits coming out the back. This is where the masking tape comes into play. And then what we're going to do is we're going to just sort of blow it. I'm going to tilt the paper a little bit. Oops. Right, so you can see now, if you want to, you can use a straw. If you want a little bit more control, you can take a fine brush and just spread out some of those feathers so he looks really proud. Bring some down here maybe. I think I might put a little touch more water down here so that this spreads a bit more. Can you see? Just a touch more down here. You can also pick paint up from here where it's already mixed and use it down the bottom. But I think I'm going to leave it. Maybe I'll just flick a few marks just up here with my brush. Can you see how I'm flicking Make sure they all go in the same direction. There we go. Just going to put a bit of blue there. Just a bit of blue around here. So you can add paint in if you want to, but the idea is to leave it quite loose. Okay, I'm just going to put some red, a bit more red around his eye, like this. Just around the eye, and a bit of purple as well. Just around there like that. And then I'm going to take a little bit of purple and I'm going to paint the beak in. Can you still see that? Yeah. So the beak would go like that. Okay, and then you need to leave this to dry. As with the others, you need to leave it to dry before you start doing any of the others on the sheet, mainly because if you move it, all this wet here will blow, it will go away. And also don't paint the eye. Okay, so leave that to dry. Don't dry it with a hairdryer, mainly because that'll just go everywhere. You can see that I've slightly gone over the edge on this one, so just be patient, leave it to dry. If it's not strong enough, add some more pigment in, but that's the head of a cockerel. Okay, I'm just going to do another one. I think I probably can, can't I? Right. Okay, so let's do the next one. We're going to do a full body this time, and we're going to put the head down here as if it's pecking some food, and the beak like this. And then you will have some legs that are just sort of coming down this way, but I've just put the lines in so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to use the same colours again. I'm going to use the alizarin crimson. You can change the colours if you want to. But again, I want to put some water down. So I'm just going to put, whoops, just knocked it, sorry. There. Put some water down loose. Now, with all these birds, practice will help enormously. You will make lots of mistakes and you'll have some successes. So the more you do, the better you get at it. And if you limit your palette, so you're not worrying too much about how many colours you've got, then that'll help as well. Okay, so basically we're putting water everywhere where the bird is. Okay, so again, it is about sort of close observation of where those areas are on this bird. Okay, so take some alizarin crimson, go in with it again, drop it in. We're going to create some palish areas to begin with, and then we're going to start to add more colour. Work in the direction of the feathers. So he's bending over, so his feathers would go up like that and then into the tail, and then add more strength where the wattle is. There, maybe around the top of the legs, and maybe on his back like that, and a nice sort of plume coming around. So, you know, it is trial and error and lots of practice. I'm going to do the tail here, and I want the tail to have some movement, so I'm going to sort of flick it like that, and then it comes down and onto the body like that. Oops, did I knock that again? Yep. Right, a little bit of blue again. We're going to put the blue here like that, and maybe have a little bit up there. Again, make it nice and fine. Use the big brush to begin with, and then go in with the small brush. You could even use a fan brush if you wanted to. to get some of those extra fine feathers coming down. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the pigment. I'm going to put that into the legs. 1, 2, and just do a couple of suggestions of some claws, but you know, don't go overboard with these. That's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the loose painting in the end. The wattle around his eye and up into that. Make that a little bit spiky, maybe. A bit of purple maybe coming out of his, behind his, where his feathers, wings are. Something like that. Maybe a little bit of purple around his face. Like that. I think I'll bring the wattle down a bit. So can you see? Just nice, sensitive, close observation. You know, you might get the odd bit that looks a bit weird, but you know, you can always change it. And like I said, don't touch. You can do the beak. You can sort of bring some of the colour down onto the beak and make it a bit purple. Put a bit of purple in there, like that. But don't touch the eye until you're completely dry. Okay, so there we have our cockerel. And like I said, you can add things on afterwards. Okay, there's a full body pecking cockerel. Okay, right, let's have a go at doing a chicken standing upright now. So again, just think about where it's positioned on your paper. I'm doing these on very small pieces of paper because I want to use them for cards later on. These are completely dry now, so you can see how they turned out. I'm hoping that the sun doesn't get too much in our way. You can see there's a bit of shadow on the work. I'm sorry about that. Okay, so this one, water again, and if you put it in, if you sort of imagine that there's a large oval like that of water just there, and then another oval just here, that's the back end of the chicken, and then all the tail feathers will come out this way and this way all over. So like I said, I'm doing it quite small just to be economical, but also because I'm putting them on cards. So you do them, yeah, I mean, you can do them really big with really big brushes, be very expressive, quite nice. I'm not going to wet the legs this time, and I'm going to use a slightly different red this time, but it's still going to be red. So wattle and around like that, and then I'm going to put some red down the lower section, and he's going to have one leg sort of around there, so I'm going to put that in, let the paint do the job again up here. Okay, and then I'm going to use a slightly different, I'm going to use a bit of yellow this time around the neck area like this, just to sort of give him a lighter touch in that area. And then I'm going to use the same purple, and so flick it, remember, flick, light movements and flicks, and then ooh, like that, and then a bit of blue maybe just in this area here, coming round there, a tiny bit there, just to give it a little bit of lift. Okay, What else? I mean, you know, less is more with these sort of paintings, but I think what I will do is just put a little bit more red around the eye area. I'm hoping this is dry. Yes, it's dry. Around the eye, like this. And it's quite dry around the eye, so okay. And a little bit of red at the top of the legs. There's going to be one leg there and one leg there. Okay, and then I'm just going to wash my brush off a bit, and I'm going to drag. I don't want the legs to be too sort of coloured, so I'm just going to use water and just describe each claw, but very loosely again. And this leg is slightly raised. 1 claw, 2. There would be 3 claws here, but you can't see them because they're on the other side. Okay, and then I've got a fan brush here. I thought you might want to learn how to use a fan brush. If you haven't got a fan brush, don't worry. You can use a sort of old acrylic brush, something that's not got that's a bit sort of broken. You just want the edges really, and you can just sort of flick around the edges with your fan brush and on these surfaces as well, and just get some of those finer lines working for you. Okay, you see how that was done? This is always best used dry, and use the wet paint to describe the feathers. Okay, let that dry off as these have. And then the final one, I've got some more images of cockerels. There's another one standing here, but because we've already got one standing up, I thought we'd do another kind of bird. This is slightly different. This is going to be a blue tit, and we've got a tiny little beak, and then the blue tit has a sort of stripe and an eye there, about there. Okay, so smaller beak as opposed to the larger one of the cockerel, and we're going to do it in flight, and some of the wings are going to come up here like this, some of the wings are going to come up here, but it's going to be very abstract. We're going to have a small suggestion of a body, and then a tail and lots of sort of flapping going on. So in the same way, let's see, right, okay, so I need to push that up a bit. Okay, so I put the eye there, the beak there, and the line of the body just about here. It's in flight. You'll see when I paint it what I mean by that. So I'm going to put a blob on the head and a blob on the body, like that. And then I'm going to drag lines of water out from the base. That'll be the tail. From the side, this will be the wing, one wing, like that. And then from the back of the head, like that. Okay, so you've got 3 projections. And what we've got, a blue tit is sort of blue, yellow, a bit of, you know, a bit of black, but we're going to use some other colours as well. We're going to use a little tiny bit of yellow just on his chest, like that. You don't want too much colour here. Blue, I'm using a cerulean blue here, round the back and on the body, and also up into some of those winged areas, like that. Down here, a little bit dragged down there. A bit more cerulean on the wing in the distance. Okay, cerulean or cobalt will do. And we're going to use a little touch of purple just to add a bit of drama. I know a blue tit doesn't have a purple wing, but it just gives it a sensation of movement. I'm going to bring a bit of that down there tiny bit in his chest and a bit round his head, like that. Okay, so you can see that that looks a little bit like a bird in flight. Another thing we're going to do is I'm going to take a old acrylic brush. Now, I don't know whether you can see that. I'm hoping you can. It's very old and it's very split, but very stiff. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to water down my cerulean or cobalt blue, and I've got a bit on the end of my acrylic brush, and I'm just going to flick it. And that again will give it a bit of move. You've got to be careful about up here, so cover this up, wait for it to dry before you do this. And a bit of purple down here, just to give it an extra bit of zhuzh. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. You might want to do a bit more, but I'm going to let that dry off, and then I'll come back and I'll do all of the eyes and the beaks. Okay. Okay, so here we've got our birds. They're all dry now. I'm just going to take some brown or some Payne's grey, or a bit of both if you want to do both. And I'm just going to mix up something quite dark to do finish the eyes off with. Okay, so it needs to be quite thick, and you need to have a small brush for this job. Okay, make sure your work is dry. And we're just going to carefully, now if you haven't got a steady enough hand for this job, you can always use a pencil or a pen. Oh, that's still wet there. I thought that was dry. Okay, so there's the eye. You can thin your mix down and maybe add a bit of colour into it, like yellow ochre or something like that. And just put a little bit of colour on the beak. I mean, the beak could even be a sort of red, or I'm just going to do a little bit darker than that so you can see what I'm doing. So there's the beak. Make sure it goes into the head. And also on the legs, you can include some little stripes on the feet and the legs. Make sure you curve these lines like that. And you can even put the odd claw on. So remember, curve the line. Make sure you use a fine brush. Don't use if you haven't got a fine brush, use a fine pen for this job. Okay, otherwise it does look a bit clunky. So let's do the other one. Here we go. Where was my mix there? Eye first. Always leave a little patch of white somewhere in the eye. Just makes it more realistic. I've already coloured that one, but I am going to define it a bit by adding a bit more purple, mainly down the bottom of the beak there. Can you see? Just to give it that added extra little bit of tone. And then down to our pecking bird. Again, the highlight would be on the top of the eye because the light is coming from above. So put the highlight at the top there. You can put a little bit of a line on that beak there. You could put some of the lines on his legs. Those legs are a little bit chunky for my liking. So if they're a bit thick, you could try and sort of lift them out a bit. But it's not worth it for me to do that for this one. Okay, and then we've got our little blue tit. Again, an eye with the highlight on it left and a little bit of beak going into the head. All right, now the other thing you can do is with the blue tit, oops, oh, the camera's sort of slipped, sorry, let me just straighten that up a bit. Ooh. Move it over, there we go. It's a funny angle, but you know, there we go. Now is to take some Payne's grey or something similar and follow that line back with a bit of a stripe, and it also goes under the cheek there. You could also put some darker patches in places, and you don't have to do this in a grey, you could do it in the purple or in the blue and just put some descriptive lines. But again, don't overdo this. If you overdo this, it loses that sort of loose quality of the flying bird, you know, and it's a shame. Then you'll see that you'll overwork it and it'll lose that loose quality. So don't be tempted too much to put too much detail in on your bird. That's all I would do, to be honest. Okay, on the others, this one, say, I would probably, let me just check, put in a couple of flashes on the tail. So around here, I would be tempted just to separate the tail a little bit from the body. I would be tempted just to put in a bit more purple, like that, and maybe flick a few of the hairs around like that, and maybe a bit of blue. What blue did we use? Oh, the phthalo blue, wasn't it? Just in there like that. And then I would probably put in a little bit of red. Do we use the alizarin crimson just in here? Only because the body is a bit lost. Oops, no, wrong red. I've just dipped it into the cadmium red. Maybe on his wattle, maybe around, just to give him a little bit more zhuzh, as they say. A little bit around his leg, like that. Okay, just pick out a few details that you might find a bit more interesting. I'm going to leave the head of this one as it is because I quite like that, and the other one, I think I'm going to leave that. The colour's strong enough in the pigment to leave it the way it is. Okay, so have a go at some loose paintings of, let me just zoom out. The sun's really strong now, it's really coming through the window. So here we go. Really look very carefully at those pictures before you do them. Go and look online, there's loads on Pinterest and Google for different birds. You don't necessarily have to do cockerels. Let me just take this off as the last thing. Let's see if I can get it off. And then you can see the finished article. Go carefully with the masking tape. It does tear sometimes. Oh, that piece there, and that one wants to come off there. I'm trying not to tear anything by taking it off. If you have trouble taking masking tape off, use a hairdryer and it will melt a bit of the glue. I've said this before, I feel like I'm repeating myself a lot. But it's good to be reminded, I think. You can see where it's torn a little bit on the sides. It doesn't matter in this instance because I'm going to cut them up and stick them on cards, so I'm not too bothered. But yeah, a hairdryer just underneath as you're peeling it melts the glue and stops it from taking your paper with it. There we go. Get rid of the masking, and there we have our 4 birds. Let me just straighten and zoom in a little. So they're quite lovely, and they would make super big paintings if you wanted them to be bigger. Okay, have a go. Loose painting, you might find it's your thing, and you can do all sorts. You could do horses, cows, anything that's moving or is, you know, has quick movement. The nice thing about cockerels is that they have that quick movement, and it's about capturing that. Okay, enjoy.